There we go. Okay. All right, so welcome everyone to Zoom again. Yay! So if you guys want to, excuse me, review your packets that Mara sent you and review the minutes from the December 14th meeting. Which, Mara, I didn't realize that Doug left. So that's a vacancy. So where do we stand right now?
So actually Doug left, but then Doug messaged me today saying he wants to come back.
Oh, okay. Okay. We'll gladly take him back.
So you actually only have one opening if Doug does get put back on. And we think that one of our other ARB members is interested. She said she was, we talked about it, but she hasn't filled the form out yet. So our clerk was reaching out to her. And then hopefully if she is willing, we could get her on to be appointed at the next council meeting, possibly. Have her interview or talk with them. And then Doug did want to come back on. So then you would be back to full.
Awesome.
So Anne, do you want to ask for approval of minutes?
Sure, sorry. Do we have an approval of minutes from the December 14th meeting?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as written.
I'll
second that.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. Moving on, we don't have any public hearings. Do we have any visitors?
We do have some visitors. I know at least two of them, if not all of them, are here to listen to the new business. So usually your visitor comments are for anyone who has items that are not on the agenda. So if there's anyone who is listening right now who has an item that's not on the agenda because we don't have any public hearings, you can raise your hand. I don't see any hands raised for that.
Okay. So moving on to new business, we do have a demolition recommendation for 713 Hersh Green Road. It is a single family dwelling, and the details were sent to you in your packets if you guys want to review those. This is a property that is pretty old. I think it was built in 1899. And the staff recommendation is that they would like to hold a request for further research into the property. So if everybody wants to look through the documentation that you've received.
So Mara, I have a question about what we are, how we can, okay, can we survey the property? I guess I would like to just do an actual survey of the property. Is that, do we have to have the homeowner say that's okay for us to go look at it? Because, you know, part of their saying that, you know, there's a lot of features missing and so forth, but for us to know if the features are missing, we would need to survey to look at it.
Sure. Typically what we say is that we ask for the photos to be provided. You are allowed to drive, down the street and look at it, but typically we don't. In this case, the homeowners are not the ones requesting the demolition.
Right.
So that puts it in a slightly different situation.
Mhm.
So I would have to check and see what our legalities are. I don't believe that we went in and did the inspection, and then they provided us with the photos that were in the packet. If we wanted to ask for additional information or photos or other things like that, that would probably be the extent of what we could do. And that what we can visibly see by driving by and being on the street.
Okay, because this is kind of a difficult one, I guess, to me, because the house is so old, and yet, that what they're saying is that a lot of the features are missing and so forth. So, and then it's a little ways from the street, so you can't really, it's hard to see it, and we certainly don't want to just say, oh, sure, go ahead and demo it because we can't see what's there. But I also don't want to intrude on someone's home. I mean, it's, I don't know how this works, but.
So I think
I guess.
there would be a couple things that we could do. One, we could request for additional closer photos of the home itself is one. Two, they could get permission and ask if we can, access the exterior of the property. I don't believe, that we don't have the legal right to go inside.
No, right.
But yes, I understand it is further back. And so it's a little bit harder to see. But yeah, you can preface requesting additional information in order to help make your determination. And one of those requests could be the option to ask if you could go onto the lot.
Okay. I guess because I also felt a little like I could save them a lot of time if I just looked at it in person instead of them trying to take photos of different things to say, here's where it's this or that, right? It would actually save a lot of time. And so I don't know. It's if the only solution is they take a lot of photos, then I guess that's what we do. But
we could ask for probably both options.
Okay, yeah, and see what, okay. I didn't realize that there was a subdivision over there that was this old. That whole subdivision is an older subdivision originally. It's not part of Webster, but.
Well, no, and I could probably show it on a map. The area that the north side of that street is part of a subdivision from the 1800s.
Right.
But the subdivision that created the street is from 1931.
Right. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I realized that. But so I just meant the original part. I thought that pretty much everything over there was from much more recent.
Oh, yeah.
Than that. No. So, like 30s would be the old part rather than it being like it was. So it was kind of interesting to me to go back in there and see that what it was even like. So it was kind of interesting. Obviously, it wasn't even part of Webster at that time, but.
Right. So we have maps from 1920s and 1930 that show where the edge of Webster was. And then we do have the different plats that were established after, and then once it became a part of Webster. And we do have some plats that show, it appears that this house and the other house to the east were the two oldest. And then as you go to either side of it, houses were built in the 20s. And then the subdivision to the south started with houses starting to be built in the 30s. And then most of them went a little bit later. And then it looks like there's some other subdivisions that happened. There's one other subdivision that happened later in the 60s that subdivided off land even further to the west.
I was kind of looking into this a little bit. And I think obviously we kind of talked about it. It's farmland. So there were probably farmhouses before there were street names or anything. And it's not this area. I kind of was kind of digging around, doing my own research. But obviously everybody has heard of Murdoch. That's a pretty major road, and there was a Murdoch farm. And so I wondered if this was possibly part of like that land parcel. I'm not really sure. But I know this house and another house that are on the street were built in the 1800s, 1899. And then there was another house built in the 20s, and then it was incorporated to Webster in the 30s. Mara, do we know, was it just completely unincorporated, or has Webster ever taken any areas that were incorporated as Shrewsbury? Because I know that's kind of a...
I'd have to go back and look at the maps and see. I had not gotten much further. There was only so much we had time to do. I know we have a few maps that show some of the key areas. I'm gonna stop the share of the agenda, and I'm gonna share a different screen for you. So this is St. Louis County's aerial system. They map aerial photographs. And they have, this is 1937, and the house is right here. So you can kind of see this is the whole area. This is Laclede Station Road here, and this is Watson. And St. Louis County has an aerial photo from 1937. This is the very beginnings of that subdivision from 1931. And then if you see, then here's 1955.
Wow.
Yeah. So we don't have, or at least county doesn't have on record. There might be some others earlier, but there is no, we don't have another aerial from before this became a subdivision. So potentially these could have been part of somehow these farmlands here. I don't know. And this, it's hard to find things because the street Hersh was established with the plat for Old Westbury. So I'm not sure even what address you would look for if you were doing additional research, which does make it even more difficult.
So I know there's a house on that street that was built in the 20s, and through Webster Groves Library, you can access the building permits from 1908 up. So if there was a house built in that area in the 20s, there would be a building permit for it, right?
There should be a building permit for it. Correct.
So if it didn't have a street name, would it be labeled as like a private drive, or?
I don't know. It might have had its own street address. It could have been addressed off of Laclede Station, possibly. It would probably take some more in-depth research to try to figure that out.
Since it wasn't part of Webster Groves yet, are the building permits in there, or maybe not?
I think it's maybe or maybe not. So yeah, you were correct. They might not even be in there because the boundaries didn't go that far down in the 20s. Yeah, they might not even be in there. The deeds, or sorry, the tax records, we were able to find, and I gave some of the information to the architects who did the research. We were able to go back to, and it's in the packet, sorry, I think the last owner, that one did show up under the Webster tax records. So even though it technically, this area wasn't part of Webster at that time, it was shown in the tax records going back to that one date that they had in their packet. So I'm going to stop share this again. I'm going to go back to the packet. They had provided. Sorry. There was a gentleman's name from the assessor's book. Oh, he was in there as 1937. And I know that our 1930-ish map, I mean, it says, I know they wrote on here, and I hadn't seen something like this before, you know, that this was like 1936. So if that did get annexed in 36, and then this lower area wasn't until 40, that area would have potentially been in the area from 1936. But then that wouldn't help us with permits from 1920s. And then it wouldn't help us know exactly, well, yeah, and it wouldn't help us know street names because the plat established Hersh Green in 1931. And the tract that it was a part of from the 1800s didn't get properly, no one actually split it with plats in any way. They just kept saying this land is deeded as part of lot such and such. And they used to do that in a lot of areas of Webster when there weren't plats. They would just say it's part of lot 5. And there's like 6 different people that own part of lot 5. We have a lot of that. More in the northern area of Webster than the southern area of Webster.
Are there any fire insurance maps for the area?
I pulled those out. I did, but there's no date on them. So I'm not completely sure what year the Sanborn maps are that I have.
Mhm.
I also pulled out some of the old tax record books from St. Louis County. They gave them to us. But the ones that I have only contain the stuff that was before we annexed the lower portion of the city. Our second set of books was the set that I was able to get some copies and some information to provide to the architects about some of the names that I was able to find. And then these photos that they included here, these are actually, or I think some of these are photos that they took from our maps that we have. This is the 1956 map, I believe. And then I don't think they took, yeah, so they took a couple other maps that were from 1909, but we've got a few others from the 20s and the 30s. Again, I hadn't spent a whole lot of time just because we didn't have the staff time to continue looking. It's usually on the applicant to find information, but then if if the commission decides that they want to do further research, it's kind of a combination of staff can do some help, but we would probably need help from the commission if you wanted to ask for further research or thought that we needed further research in regards to whether this needed to be something that could potentially be nominated as a historic structure.
I'm wondering if the Webster Groves Historical Society has more information, especially about this area, since it was incorporated, I mean, kind of late, the 30s. I mean, Webster was pretty well established by then. So I'm wondering if there's more information about this incorporation and they have any other properties surrounding this area that are kind of similar. Which I'm not really familiar if there's that many structures that were built, you know, in the late 1800s, early 1900s in that area.
I know we have a full accounting list. So to remind you guys, let me see if I can find our map. Hold on. Sorry, I keep bouncing you around. So just as a reminder, we have this. Now, older than 100 years old now at this point in time. Older than 100 years old is anything older than when I put this map together, 2019. So 2019, 100 years old, that would put something being built in 1919. You can see very, very few red dots. And there's that small grouping here, but that probably also includes a couple houses from the 20s. But yes, there's very few, and most of them, from our understanding, were like a farmhouse with a bunch of farm area around it. So if we went back to St. Louis County aerials and zoomed out to that area, so you can kind of see there was probably like down here, there's a farm. And then there's probably a little farmhouse here. And if you go back to our historic homes map, there's a house, there's a house, here's a house. So probably something similar to here, but we don't necessarily know that definitively. But there's much less in that general area. Oh, there is a message in the chat, says we checked with the Webster Historical Society. They did not have any information. They told me to check with the library, and we'd already done that. Thank you.
I went on Shrewsbury's, the city of Shrewsbury's website today, and obviously they don't really have anything like what Webster has regarding properties and century properties and whatnot. But given that this property is so close to that area, I don't know if that's something worth reaching out to the city of Shrewsbury to see if they have any maps or anything pertaining to this particular area when it was incorporated. I tried to like play around and see if they had anything, and I really didn't find anything.
What is Marlboro?
Yeah, I was gonna say this is much closer to Marlboro
Mhm.
versus Shrewsbury. Let me see if I can get. Couldn't remember if ours has boundaries. It doesn't really have the boundaries, but yeah, it is much more of Marlboro. And then this is unincorporated right in here before it goes to Crestwood over here. So some of this is still unincorporated that's not in Marlboro. And Marlboro is sort of wraps around here on both sides, if I remember correctly, where their boundaries are. I'm gonna put the packet back up or leave these screens on.
Does anyone have any other questions or feedback regarding this property?
I read the packet this morning and was just concerned about the amount of stuff that was cited that needs to be done to the house, and wondering how long has it been deteriorating and not maintained, because the pictures, a number of the pictures show cracks and things. That doesn't worry me. The basement looks like it's one like my first house in Webster. So the intent to tear it down makes me wonder again if it was just planned, planned demolition by neglect.
So I'll tell you that is not my understanding. It's a family that's lived there for quite a while. And it's neighbors who are wishing to purchase it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've had a few others where we know that someone's just, you know, left it. But the residents are still living in it.
So I guess on the, reverse side of that, I guess I was kind of wondering, of course, they're going to say it needs to be, there's this problem, they'll pick out every problem because that's going to make us more likely to approve the demolition. At least that's what I would do. I mean, that only makes sense for you to make it sound like it needs to, demolishing it isn't a big problem. So I guess that's where I would kind of like to see more of it somehow or another. Like I said, however you figure that out, whatever we can do is fine.
Well, my impression of the list of things that need to be addressed, yes, there's a lot of things listed, but they are minuscule things.
They are.
There is not a major item on that list. Power wash mildew from a wall. That's 15 minutes. I mean,
Especially a house that was
Or rip out the carpet.
built in the
Yeah.
late
Right.
1800s.
I think there was one hole in a ceiling that needed to be patched.
The
That was-
GFIs
that
and
was
things like that could
That
be
was the
cited.
biggest item.
Yeah.
So I don't
Right.
think we're talking about a house that can't be saved.
Mhm.
I don't either.
I think we're talking about a house that we need to find something significant about this house. In other words, we need to learn that somebody lived in it who was famous, or somebody designed it who was famous, or it's the perfect example of some sort of architecture. Because just because we like it and we don't think it's bad, doesn't mean we can stop them from tearing it down.
But the subdivision is fairly intact, and it's really the only subdivision over there like that. And so Webster didn't incorporate a lot of subdivisions after a certain point. It is something that tells the story of Webster. And for Webster Groves, that is something that we can use as a reason to nominate a property. Obviously, so in our guidelines, that's not something that's spelled out specifically, typically under the National Register, but it is spelled out in Webster's guidelines for us. And I guess to me, that's something I think we need to look at. That subdivision was there, and those houses are, it's sort of an anomaly in the area. And it's, so that makes it part of what Webster is a very large group of subdivisions. And this is another one. And there's a whole bunch of old subdivisions. That's what we are. So we can't allow people to take them away, or we end up with no Webster Groves. Historic Webster Groves is no longer historic. So I think we just need to look at like that subdivision itself, because if it's from the 30s, we're looking at something that would be 50 years old. That's what the qualification is, not 100. So even though here in Webster, we tend to go with century homes, that's not the standard that you have to go to. So, the fact that the subdivision was there in the 30s is actually, I think, somewhat significant. It's part of the growth of Webster and how it grew to a certain point, and that was that. So I think looking into the subdivision in general, it's something that we probably should do, and that group of homes.
I mean, I agree with that also, because this specific property, along with the one next door to it, were built in the late 1800s. And I feel like they were kind of the anchors to what became this subdivision.
Right. It's what started it. And then it became this whole little group of homes. And then it was, joined in. Right. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, I agree. I'm also kind of questioning, we talk a lot about, can we find a historical person who lived at that property? And I guess part of me is wondering what the definition of that is, because I know we found a resident of this house and he lived there in the 30s. So obviously the house existed decades before he lived there, but you can find documentation of him and his family and his kids, and newspaper articles of him singing in a choir at a local church, and he was on the Missouri Historical Society. So that's kind of a question I have too, is how do you define a historical person in a property that is old and may or may not need to be saved? But one of the guidelines is, if somebody historically prevalent lived there. So what is that definition, I guess, is what I'm kind of struggling with.
In my experience, it's usually someone who's had an effect on something, on history. So they've done something that set something in motion, or they were part of a specific event or something like that. So say he was a businessman who was involved in building some of the buildings or something like, in Webster. So he could have local significance because he was a prominent businessman. If he was just sort of an individual, that I've never seen that as anything other than part of the history. It's not, I've never seen a building saved because it's associated with kind of an ordinary businessman. You might tell about the person, but they don't, it's not usually just that, in my experience. Of course, then there's the people who are super famous that the building could have almost no integrity, and then it's still okay because the person's so famous, but
So just as a quick reminder to all of you, the way the process works is you have the ability to hold it to a certain period of time. So it would really hold it only till the next meeting. At that point, you either have to say that you've found some things and want to either try to nominate it or do further, that you've gotten some research and want to do further research, or you then would go to the point of voting that it is okay to demolish. So we had like a flow chart that kind of took you to, hey, you can do some research, you can request to hold it for a little while you do that research. But if you can't find anything, you then go down. And if you decide that you did want to nominate it, then there's a certain amount of time frame that you'd have to get everything pulled together to start nominating it and getting it through city council, or you have to approve it for demolition. So there's a few just sort of steps. And I think you need to make some decisions on what you all want to do at this time.
I would say that it seems like we should do a little more research. The only thing, it does seem as though that might be tricky to find anything, but I think we should at least put in some effort to find some information about the area or something. Not, just kind of due diligence there, because partly it is an old home, a very old home. And it seems relatively intact in its general form. It's not like it's just a whole different house. It's generally the house that was built, at least from what we can tell, what little we can tell.
I mean, I agree. Just from the little searching around that I did this afternoon, and from the map that Mara presented us to, it was generally farmland around that area. And given the age of the property, I feel like there might be some prominent history, not only to Webster Gross, but to the St. Louis area in general. And I'm not really familiar with that area, so I kind of feel like I would like to have a little more time to kind of look around and see if this was connected to anything, or just, you know, the beginnings of that whole area in general. Because it's very interesting to me that this existed for 40 years before it became a part of Webster. So I feel like there's got to be something there. Does anyone else have any insights to this, or thoughts, or questions?
So I'm just going to suggest, if you make a motion, whatever your motion is going to be, that if you wanted to include any other requests or any other things, Angela, some of the things that you had talked about, if there's anything else you want to request of them, or any other things that you think are important points, to make that as part of the motion.
So I have another question for you before we do that. So if we decide that we'd like to have more research done and so forth, how do we go about that as a group? Like, because it doesn't really make any sense for us to sort of each individually work, you know, that isn't very efficient. So
So we would want to, after you make that vote, we would be able to have a conversation on, you know, if different people want to take certain elements on. Staff can provide certain things. I know, I believe St. Louis County's letting some research be done. You know, the question is, has anyone done an actual deed search to go back beyond the only one that we do know, which is the gentleman that we know he owned it in 37 or whatever it was. If someone looked at the tax record from the year before, you can't look it up by last name. It's all organized by last name. You'd have to someone would have to take the time to scroll through and see if they could find the Lovejoy plat and find that lot. And then maybe see if they could figure out what the name was if they didn't do a deed search kind of thing.
right.
So yes, it would have to be all of you having a conversation, that if there's a couple of you that have some time that could do some additional research, and staff will try to provide as much as we can, to an extent, just knowing that my planner's last day is Thursday. Yeah, so it's just gonna be me for a while I look for a new planner. So I'm gonna be kind of buried. I did try to do as much as I could to give, you know, the applicants some of the stuff that we had on file, to give them some starting points. There are some other things that I tried to look through today additionally, but I didn't find much. And again, it might be that we do some research and we can't find anything, and then at the next meeting you all vote on it. So and we can do as much as we can based on what we have at our available to us.
It seems to me that we need one person to volunteer to take the lead on research to direct the actions of everyone else. Does that make sense? If we're going to do this? And I'm not volunteering. I'm just making that suggestion.
That would be correct. And then you could probably divvy it up into some various things, you know, like if you had someone looking at old permit records, or someone looking at the tax records that are available online, or someone calling Marlboro and seeing if they have any historic maps. You could probably divvy it up into some small jobs that wouldn't be that much for each person if they were able to do that.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we hold the request until our next meeting. And during that time, we research further what we can. Is that, and then we also request from the applicant any further information that they may have at all. Anything would be, we never know what might be helpful. Anything they've gotten or anything, for instance, like that they have, if they have looked somewhere already. And the request that we actually look at the home on the outside ourselves, or they take some extra photos.
If they have a copy of the title or the abstract, that would be awesome.
Right, exactly. It's there, everything, there's all kinds of information that you never know how it might help us. And if there's any sort of, I don't know, what else, anything.
So that was
Do we-
your motion.
That was a motion. I will second that motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Is there anyone opposed? Okay.
So for those that are listening, the next meeting is scheduled for. Sorry, I thought I had it up on my screen and I must have closed it. Hold on. Let me go back to our agenda. Our next meeting is Tuesday, February 8th. And then I will be in touch with the applicants to ask about any other additional information. And then I'll try to scan or take photos of all the other documentation that I think we had that were sort of some of the starting points too. And you're muted. Yep.
That moves us to our old business, which is our projects for the 2021-2022 year that we've discussed. Obviously, the last couple of meetings, we talked a lot about the Joy Build homes. Steve and I did get your emails and I haven't really done anything with them. I apologize with the holidays and everything that's going on.
I want to say that I noticed.
Personally, I think to move those forward, we really need to come up with a subcommittee. And I know we've talked about this, Mara, a lot. And I guess I just want to know again what I need to do in order to recruit people to help us.
So three different things. So I know that I did not link anything new in this packet. I know there's a lot of new information, but I didn't link it in the packet for two reasons. One, I know they're currently being stored in a Google Drive, which actually I can't access from the city computer.
Okay.
But if you provide things to me, I can put them into a OneDrive and provide access to everyone to access the files from the OneDrive, because that's a way I can hold them in the city function. I also know that I think there's an email address floating out there. We just need to be real careful
Yes.
with Sunshine Law.
Right.
So you can definitely use that to send things, but it might in some ways almost be easier to send it to me to put into that shared drive, or we can figure out how to put things so that documents are always something that's available and not that we don't ever run afoul of Sunshine Law.
Okay. Yeah. No, I set up that account just so that I would have access to the Google Drive.
Oh,
And-
got it.
And I'd never intended to use that as a communication tool. I just needed the account.
The account to use the Google Drive. I get
Right.
it. Okay, got it.
Have we left the public portion of this meeting behind, and I can now, well, can I take control? I want to share. If I
You
may.
can totally share. We're
I-
still in a public meeting. I mean, we're still in a meeting that anyone can attend at any time. At this point, it's just us. All of the guest attendees who were concerned or questioning the house.
Okay. All right. What I wanted to show is I set up this Google Drive. Now I've got all the building permits that from 1908 up through 1931 are in here. I've been taking photos either from Google Earth or from walking the dog. I've got a lot of them with photos. That are linked directly from there. All right, now how do you get out of that?
Go back, click back on your Excel.
Oh, it
In the
opened.
tab, your Excel tab.
Well, it's in Google. It's a little weirder than all this. And I've got this,
I keep going over 2 more tabs, or 1 more tab. There you go.
I have a Zoom thing over my
Oh, got
controller.
it, but you couldn't see
Okay.
it.
But what I really want to show off is this. Whoops, not that. We've all seen that before. This right here. I was able to create a
Oh,
map
Ooh,
and import
nice.
the Excel into it.
oh, fancy.
So my very own custom Google map. So these are all Joy houses that I've identified from the building permits.
Wow.
That is very cool.
I'm really excited about this. This is why I had to take
Amazing.
over.
Look
the
at all,
meeting.
oh, look how many are in a row over there.
Are these from the building permits that you identified, like on the Webster Groves Library?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm up to 1931. They really drop off after 1929. And there's not going to be a whole lot more through 45, to be honest. Let's see, what else? Oh, I have identified several houses that I think are at risk. This one right here. If you look on both sides of it, and then you look at that little baby right there in the middle, he seems tenuous. He's prime for somebody to come in and say, we could put twice as much house on this lot.
Mhm.
What a neat
And
little house too.
I have,
this one here,
I
on
actually
Oak,
appraised, I actually appraised that house last year, and it is owned by an investor. They're already coming in on it.
yeah, this one right here, adorable little bungalow, but look to the right of it.
Yep.
So this one's doomed. Unless we can do something, I mean, unless we can establish all of these houses as a group that needs to be protected. We're
I
gonna
think that's
lose this.
great. I think that's great motivation for us.
But I mean, this is a nice, beautiful little 2-bedroom house
Oh, yeah.
that could
Yes.
easily, I mean, you could put 5 bedrooms on that lot.
Yeah, that's
Wow,
a nice space, and it's in a great location because it's very close to Larson Park. I walk
Yeah.
by that house all the time.
Yeah.
Anyway, I've been having a good time. I don't know what you guys have been doing in your spare time, but I've been having a good time with this. Anyway, that's what I had to share.
So one of the things that you can also do with the Excel spreadsheet as a reminder, and actually do you want to stop sharing for a second and let me see if I
Absolutely.
can
If I know,
share?
stop share. There we go.
Let me see if I can share. We had at one point, and then my question is if I can remember and if I've kept it. We at one point had a test run of our GIS system that could map and show photos. And we had done I'm going to forget where it is. and it's not this one, but we had done something similar to this, where you actually could, when you clicked on each one, you could see the photo. So the map could tie to the photos. And if you ended up, you could use the Excel spreadsheet to send letters to those that are, to let them know that they are, you know, something very cool and unusual, or the history about Joy Built Homes. There could be some education. So there's a number of things that your subcommittee could kind of pull together. What I would say is that you probably need to, you can reach out in multiple ways about how you have a project that the Historic Preservation Commission is working on, that if anyone is interested, they could join the subcommittee. It would involve focusing on that one project and not necessarily serving and having to be at monthly meetings necessarily, and that they could do things sort of in their own time. But at the last meeting, you all did vote to have a subcommittee. So that part's already done. It's just a matter of, if you end up having official meetings, whether they're on Zoom or not, I can set them up for you. But we have to do notification requirements if we hold them. If it's simply one person sending out an email to all those on the subcommittee and saying, here's what some of the jobs are, let me know what you can do. There's other options, so people can kind of work on their own. But there's a lot of flexibility. We just need to make sure we follow a few key things related to sunshine law and meeting notification posting. And in some cases, I might have some resources. I don't have a GIS person. We don't have our GIS person right now. She's out temporarily, and we're hoping she's coming back soon. But if we had things prepped to give her, so if you already have the spreadsheet that is pretty much already there, there's a way to tie in the photographs that can automatically map it all into the GIS mapping system and provide it almost as an app, like this one is, because this one can be an app on your phone.
Is there a minimum or maximum amount of people we can have on a subcommittee?
There's nothing that says that you have to have a minimum or could be at a maximum.
Okay.
Not for subcommittees.
I guess my question is, I would gladly reach out. I know we have a group on Facebook that's Century Homeowners. A lot of people are very passionate about it. I'd love to post about it. I've just been kind of hesitant because I want to make sure I'm not overstepping or, you know, with the sunshine laws or anything like that.
If you're just letting them know that it's an option that to join a subcommittee, that's not in any way a violation.
Okay.
And then it might be worth taking that spreadsheet and merging it to see where the overlap is with which ones of those are already Century Homes.
Yeah, that would be, I'm trying to remember. Do I have a link to, no, I don't have the spreadsheet. I was wondering if I had the Excel file. I do have that Excel file.
You do have the Excel file because you were the one who helped fix it for us.
Yes, and I can actually import that as a separate layer so that you can turn them on and off.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, no, I will absolutely do that and see what it looks like.
Adding some extra fun to your work.
Yay, I get to crunch more data. Okay, well, that's what I had for my status update. Again, if anybody wants to play along, let me know.
Well, I think you did a great job, Stephen. That's amazing, the data that you pulled and the walks that you took.
Yeah, well, got a new puppy. She's my assistant.
Oh.
So the other member of the ARB who's interested in joining has met you and doing a walk and walked past your house and met your puppy. Her name's Carol.
Okay.
And she remembered meeting you when
that
we were discussing Joy Built Homes. And I was suggesting that she join, and she said, wait a minute, I think I know him. I think I met him, and I think I met his new puppy. She lives around the corner
Okay,
from you.
huh, interesting. I'm sure I will recognize
When you
her.
see her on the screen, if she gets appointed by the council, you'll probably go, oh,
Oh, her.
yeah.
Okay.
Apparently she chatted with you about your gardens and the puppy.
Those are the two topics that usually come up.
Mhm.
Well,
So
while we're on the topic of subcommittee, if anybody in this group wants to join the subcommittee, feel free. Because we're recruiting.
and then the key question is, you've got a couple other projects you thought about doing. Does someone else have more of an interest in either of the other two items? And want to start their own subcommittee for one of those?
I can say that I spoke to the lady who lives in the Lustron home on Simmons, Simmons. It's a rental. She loves it. She pointed out that the house right next door has been cited, but it's also a Lustron.
Mhm.
I looked at it and said, oh, duh, because I never would have thought about it. But yes, it's identical. So I did
We have
get to
that
do
one on our list, as Mark does. It is a Lustron, but it's cited. We do have that on our list. that one.
Okay. Yeah.
I discovered a couple on Hazel that
Mhm.
are Lustrons that I didn't realize were there because I usually am on Edgar and Jackson and not on Hazel, but they're easily recognizable.
Anyway, if anybody wants to visit a Lustron home, she offered a tour.
Oh, that's nice.
Oh,
They are very interesting inside. I've been in one, and it's the planning and the cantilevered kitchen cabinets and things like that are very interesting.
I had a muddy puppy, so I didn't accept the offer at the time.
And Steve, you said she's on Simmons?
Yes. About 300 block.
I'm going to share something for a second. This is not an updated one because I have gone back on and written notes. But this is a Word document about some of the ones. So there's the two on Hazel.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the Simmons one that's sided and roof and has a different roof put on. There's another one on Simmons that was sided. Now, looking at all of these, I know that I believe that if I'm remembering all my ones correctly, the 237 Baker, the second one down there, has also been removed for a demolition for a new home. One or two of the Simmons ones has also been, I had a, so 237 Baker has been demolished, 44 Hart has been demolished, and 241 Simmons has been demolished. All three of those in the last like 5 to 6 years.
Yeah.
So we're now down to 8 have been removed. So we've got 3 less on that list. So we're down to 18.
You know, is there a Facebook page or other programs going on where people are tracking the Lustron homes? Because
Not necessarily in Missouri. Ohio is huge. So in this packet, let me go back. I'm going to stop share for that. Sorry, I have to keep stopping share and starting share. If you look in here, so Brentwood has a huge grouping.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a man from Brentwood reach out because he thought he'd seen in an article that we were going to do some things. And we hadn't done anything yet. So there were some old articles. I know there's a couple different places. I think in here we had Indiana does a lot, Ohio does a lot. So we have an example of what Indiana did in terms of being a multiple property nomination form, when it's multiple properties and not a full district. And then I think in here we had some links to, yeah, here's a list of ones identified in Indiana. So there's some really cool websites in some of the other states that have a lot more research than we have. But this was an article from 2017, sort of talking about the lustrons. And again, this one gentleman from Brentwood reached out and was asking for help. And I said, well, we haven't really gotten very far along with it either. But I think he was looking for an ally because he would like to try to do some sort of nomination to try to save the ones in Brentwood. And they have less of them, but they do have a whole grouping, I think, all on one street together. So he was asking for additional potential help.
Yeah, I think the ones in Brentwood are more intact with the style of Lustron, whereas like I know a lot of these that were on the list have been cited and kind of reimagined.
I think it's Litzinger in Brentwood that they're all, there's like several streets in a row there that just have 3 or 4 each.
I think so too, Steve. I think it is Litzinger.
I would agree. That sounds correct.
The local MLS has lustrum homes everywhere from 2 hours south of here. There's a couple in St. Charles all the way to Belleville that are advertised as those homes. So
yeah,
I just wonder if there are other communities doing something similar.
I think Brentwood's maybe one of the only other ones who's been trying to look at the possibilities of trying to, they weren't old enough at a certain point. People sort of think of 100 years. Why would we try to protect anything that's less than 100 years old? And then that's when we recently changed everything to try to look at more the 50-year mark. That, there's mid-century modern out there. There's very interesting things from these different timeframes that architecturally we're starting to lose them because no one's thinking that there's an importance to them. So this is in here. We've got a couple examples of how the National Register in a couple other states have done a nomination. Back a while ago, which is why there was an article and the guy from Brentwood thought we'd done something. We had started looking at and had sent letters out to the various owners of some of the properties to try to see if we could maybe pull something together for that type of nomination. And there just wasn't enough volunteer help to kind of keep it moving. So it didn't really go too far. And I know we've got a couple that are really on the edge of potentially, I know there's one that was a rental property over by Schnucks that no one is living in now. And they tore down 2 other houses on that block. And it is owned by Schnucks. And then there's another one, I think, that was in some pretty bad condition. And so there's a couple that could be pretty close. So this was one of the other projects that you all had talked about, but it does need to have someone kind of behind it, whether it's another subcommittee, whether it's one person kind of spearheading and trying to see if there's more interest from owners as a possibility.
What was the feedback from any of the owners? You said that the owners were contacted. Was there anyone who was just opposed as could be, or were people
I don't know.
indifferent?
It was kind of before me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
Because it seems like starting with the owners is almost the thing to do, because if there isn't support from the owners, we can't do it.
you technically can still do it, but it's not as easy.
Yeah.
It's tough if they're rental properties too.
Yeah. Well, especially with so few. It
Yeah,
makes-
and who, is it an individual that owns it? Is it a rental company? And then they're not living in them, so they might not really care about the origin or anything like that.
So it looks like, according to my files, it looks like maybe the Word document with the mailing labels was from 2006.
Oh,
But then there's a letter there's the start of a letter. Like I'm looking at the different things in this folder. There's a dear something letter. There's another addresses that seems to be a Word document from 2017, but that could mean that we just resaved it in 2017. I do have a whole folder. Let me see if there's anything else. I think I just kind of had scanned everything that we had and put it in the packet. So I don't think I have. Yeah, I don't have. Oh, wait a minute. Here's a letter from 2005. My husband and I have fought a battle over the last 2 months to buy a historic Lustron home. We're both designers. By the time we find, so it talks about like trying to urge people together to save it. And this was in 2005, was trying to see if there was a way that they could fight to keep from something being torn down. But I don't know if there's been much since then. I think it was always on the list of HPC of, oh, that'd be a really cool project, but I don't think it really went too far after that.
So I would be willing to start something. I can't say how quick I'd be able to do some research and stuff, but I would be willing to start. And I guess even, really even contacting the owners and so forth is a start, I guess. So I'm willing to do that. I guess I would need access to, I don't know what you were talking about there, where I get that kind of information, but
I can provide you with mailing labels or what information we have. We can send out a letter on city letterhead.
Oh, okay, right.
Yeah, there's a number of things. It would be more like, yeah, working together on things.
Okay, yeah,
we can
that's what
provide
I
for
was.
staff.
Okay, yeah, I'm willing to do that. Like I said, I can't say that I have like oceans of time to do it, but I have some time to do it.
I think the Lustron homes it's very important. Obviously, it's still on our list. I think personally, I found Steven's information about the Joy Built homes. I'm more passionate about that because it's very specific to Webster. Obviously, Lustron homes were built in different states, different communities. I still think that they deserve to be saved. I think it would be really interesting to try to track down people who grew up in Lustron homes because they weren't built 100 years ago. You could actually track down people who grew up there or lived there. So I definitely think it's something worth pursuing. I think the Sears kit homes are also interesting, but I also feel like that's something that's not necessarily specific to Webster. Obviously, that was more of a nationwide thing. I've seen news stories about Sears kit homes. So I think personally, I'm more interested in pursuing going after the Joy Built homes and figuring out how to identify those, if we need to do a walk with them or designate them or whatnot. Because Stephen, the one meeting, it wasn't December, I think it was November, we talked about it. And we also went into like bird built homes. Like I felt like it kind of spun off into another topic that's very specific to Webster. So I think that's very interesting. I think it'll take us on a whole nother route. So I agree, if we can kind of identify the Lustron homes, and if someone wants to take that on, that's great. I personally kind of want to stick with the Joy Built homes as a project. And then I don't know if anybody feels super passionate about taking on the Webster Grove Sears kit homes, or if that's something we maybe need to table for now with these two projects.
You might just discuss it again next month. Might discuss it again next month when you have your final two members also. So no, you don't have to come. I mean, you can table it, but you can also table it and then see if the other members that come on are interested, or if you are sending stuff to the Century Home group, at a certain key point, these houses are going to become century homes. We're already in 2022. So we're bumping closer and closer to those, hitting that age. So it might be something that someone says, hey, we're interested in saving century homes, but hey, we're interested in saving the ones that haven't gotten to the point where people have stopped maintaining them. And maybe we're on that edge of prepping people to have the history so that as soon as it turns 100 years, they can get a century plaque, or do something with a historic nomination. I don't know, just a thought in how to reach out to others who might want to sit on subcommittees. We have nothing else on the agenda. So if you guys are good, I can make sure to send stuff to the various people.
So for Hersh Green, how are we going to do that? How are we going to look into that? Especially considering some stuff has already been researched. So I'm only so familiar with the different places to go. I've done like county deed search for my own house, but that's about the, and a little bit of other stuff, but I don't know the St. Louis area well enough as far as historic research goes to know where to go. But if someone, like you said, if there's a bunch of tasks to do, I'm willing to do one if someone tells me where to look.
So here's the couple things that I would think about. So that last name that we found or that I found and gave to the architect was the last one. I just happened to kind of went through, found it at that point, I think in the 1937 deed book. So if someone wanted to spend the time to look at the year right before that and see if they could find that, like find a name, where they'd have to look first at, let me see if I can share. I sent it to the architect. Like one task could be someone looking through the that one tax record in the records from at the library. Sorry, I'm looking to see. I feel like I sent them a link. Okay, wait, here we go. Hold on. Sorry, if I was a little more prepared, I would have had some of these up in tabs. So share screen. So there's the building permits, but there's also library. In the tax records, I just happened to look in 1937 and found his name and said to them, hey, I see he's in here in 1937. So if someone wanted to go into the 1936 tax book, in 1937, his last name, does anyone have that PDF in front of them?
Was it the Silver?
Yes. So I had gone at one point to the tax records are by last name. And so it was then done not by address, which makes it a little easier to look for, because if it's by address and it's by Hersh Green, you can't keep looking for Hersh Green anymore. But if someone wanted to look at the 1936 book and try to scroll through and find that same basically plat book and lot number, we might be able to track that name through the years to get us back to the next year. So, we're kind of at that, the tax books go back pretty far. And that one might be something that if someone wanted to play with the tax records, they'd be able to find some of the things. And I amazingly found his one address his one thing pretty quickly. Let's see if I can zoom in. So I'm just up to the M's at this point, but basically you can see, like this says Mitchell is the last name here, and this is the Longview subdivision, and then it has the block and the lot. So if you go back and find his 1937 record with his last name and know what the name of the plat is, if you're able to just scroll through page by page looking for that plat name, if someone was able to do that, we might be able to figure out who the person was that bought it right before that, because doing the deed search is a little bit harder, and county records, I think right now are harder to get to. It seems like they were able to get to St. Louis County because it's in their documentation that they had some things from county. So one task could be someone who is willing to scroll through one of these old books and try to figure out who the name was, who Mr. S whatever bought it from, which might help us go backwards through the years, because once you have a last name, you can go find this page pretty quickly. It's the problem of if you don't know what the last name is, that's when it gets a little more difficult. If you don't have the last name, because the tax records are by last name, we have a harder time going back. So that would be one project. Another would be contacting Marlboro, seeing if they have any historic maps. I'm trying to think. I've got a few other maps of the city. I'm not sure much else that I would have to help us, other than finding a name to try to go a little bit further back in time. What is this? P. I'm working towards the S's.
The library has a case full of historic maps as well.
Okay. So there might be something else we can find.
If
Oh,
anybody's
wait.
willing to go out in public.
Yeah. So this is, we're at SE, sorry, can someone tell me his name again? S.
It was either Selvert or Cybert.
Yeah, I think that's right. I'm in the C's. SC. There's a lot of SCs.
There are.
I found it much easier. Wait, SEB. So we're at SEB. SEL. I think it should be in here somewhere. There, I think.
Yeah, it was
this is
Selvert.
There it is.
Selbert.
There it is. Okay, so he's right here, Edwin. Lovejoy. So Lovejoy, and then it just said lot, and it has sort of 4-5, and it has the street name saying it fronts on Hersh Green. So if someone was able to look for Lovejoy in the 1936 book and kind of scroll through those and try to find someone who's on Lovejoy lot 4 or 5. Now the problem is going to be that Lovejoy lot 4 or 5 is almost everybody on that side of the street. So it's a little difficult. But there were only a couple houses in that time frame.
Well, and I know one of the houses on that street was built in 1922, which was still before it was incorporated as Webster Groves. But 1922, and I know we talked about this, there's building permits, but if it wasn't Webster Groves, it might not be in those building permits.
But someone could look through 1922 and see if they could find anything.
I actually did today, and I didn't, and the date could be off too.
Right.
It could be off
It could
by
be
a
21,
year,
it could
so
be
yeah,
20.
but if it's not in Webster's building permits, because it wasn't incorporated Webster Groves,
It's not going to be anywhere.
it won't be anywhere.
County doesn't keep those records.
Okay.
Yeah, the only reason why the library has these is that we kept the records, gave them to the Historical Society, and then they worked with the library who got a grant to scan everything in.
Okay.
Yeah,
I mean, it wouldn't be through the Missouri Historical Society or anything.
someone could make the call. I forget how much they have over there.
They have a lot of stuff, but it's mostly come on down and look for it.
Mhm. Yeah,
Because that's where I did find in 1922, I did find a building permit, and it was for a residence. It didn't have a street. And I screenshotted it and saved it because from the handwriting that I could see, it said Laclede Road. And so I was like, okay, this could possibly be something. And that's when it said Murdoch's Farm. But then when I Googled Murdoch's Farm, that's not the area that the street is in.
so how about this? I will pull together everything that they provided to us and everything that I also had, anything any kind of documentation or records we have, and maybe pull together a quick bullets of the things that I think might be a couple little research items. Send it out to everyone. And if anyone wants to offer to take on any of those tasks, you can let me know. That might be the best way to go about it, because we could sit here all night scanning through fun stuff.
That sounds like a plan.
Is that a good plan?
Yeah.
And I will try to do it ASAP, because yes, I will be plannerless in 2 more days, which is going to add a lot to my plate until I can hire someone to take that position.
And Stephen, I'm gonna put some posts out there to try to get a subcommittee going.
Okay. I will look forward to that.
Okay. And then and I know, Angela, you said you would possibly be interested in looking into the restaurant or trying to connect with somebody who owns a restaurant.
Yeah. And probably the first step is to get that information, Mara, start there and look through it. Yeah, I'll do that. And I'll get started. Let you know what I got the next time.
And I'll send stuff over, and then once we have access to certain things, I can add them to the agenda for either the next meeting or the meeting after.
I think these are good jumping off points. I think adding the Sears Kit homes, although we know there's some in Webster and they deserve looking into. I think sometimes having all 3 of those, it's a little daunting because they all require some research. So I think if we can at least tackle a couple of those and start working on those and see what becomes of that, then maybe we dive into the kit homes.
I agree. And I think just movement on a couple of these is encouraging.
It
And
could
not
be
overwhelming,
overwhelming.
perhaps.
I mean, even with this house today, that, the research that you have to look into to figure out, can we save this and is it prominent? And, obviously we know it's an old property, older than a lot of the ones we're presented with. So it's worth looking into, but it's a lot of manpower and time and research and finding the needle in the haystack. So I think sometimes it can get a little bit daunting. So I think if we have kind of a couple of projects that we're really gonna invest our time in, I think that's worth it.
I agree.
All right, well, do we have a motion to, I don't even know what this is called, to adjourn?
To adjourn.
I will move that we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, everybody, have a great month and stay safe and healthy.
I'll let you know. I'm gonna guess that February, we're probably still gonna be virtual only. But if anything changes, I'll let you know.
Thank you, Mara.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
you.
So,
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye.
Aye.
circles and circles.